Waffles, and I'm a government whistleblower turned political commentator, and this is the top economic news highlights for the past 24 hours. Today is November 24th, 2025. It is 10:19 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Today, the stock market closed with the S&P 500 up 1.48% at $668.73. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, DIA, closed up 0.40%. That is at $464.44. Invesco QQQ closed up 2.60%. That is at $605.16. Today, Scott Bessent, Treasury Secretary, yesterday, Scott Bessent's sorry lying ass says the U.S. economy faces no recession risk despite shutdown hit. The Republican government shutdown caused $11 billion of lost economic output for the United States. Everything Republicans say is typically the opposite of what's actually going on, so I'm just going to assume that this likely means that we are facing a recession risk. Implications: this is a strong public message of resilience, but it raises oversight questions. What underlying data supports such optimism, especially when major statistical series are delayed by the shutdown? The mismatch between message and data availability merits scrutiny. Economic markets respond positively on November 24th with tech-heavy gains driven by increased odds of a December rate cut by the Federal Reserve, which would be a horrible idea. It would cause short-term relief and long-term struggle for the economy. Market sentiment is tilting toward loosening monetary policy. This places pressure on the Fed and the administration if trade or inflation headwinds emerge. The policy space may narrow from a governance angle. Are expectations of rate cuts based on durable fundamentals or ephemeral? I don't even know what that word means. Optimism. So, I mean, why don't we just get rid of the tariffs and make it so people can afford to live instead of cutting interest rates and driving people into debt that they likely won't be able to pay because the cost of everything is up substantially due to Donald Trump doing what appears to be looting the American people by putting tariffs on half of the world's output. He has put tariffs on half of the world's countries. And he personally is trying to benefit from all of that. Recent data came out that a substantial amount of money that was supposed to be going to our public services was going to Donald Trump's golf course visits. We got that documented. Give me just a moment. I'm going to pull that up. So that would be $300 million of FEMA funds were diverted to Trump's golf course visits. That is emergency funding that's supposed to go towards natural disasters. A bunch of young people died in Texas recently due to a lack of FEMA funding. Private model GDP now estimate for quarter 3 2025 holds at 4.2% growth, latest as of November 21st. The Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta GDP Now model, November 21st. Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta. Implications: while a 4.2% growth estimate is healthy, it is still a model estimate and subject to revision, especially with actual data releases delayed by the shutdown. The dependence on now casting models rather than full data increases policy risk. Transparency and data gaps with the federal shutdown affecting release schedules on key economic data series, which are delayed, like retail sales and industrial production, for example. The administration's optimism, e.g. no recession risk, stands on a less complete data foundation. It's a load of horse shit that some asshole is saying, that asshole being Scott Bessent, is saying to try and make people feel optimistic with no real reason for that optimism. Why? Because the Trump administration is most likely, pretty likely, engaging in financial crimes, especially if we're seeing FEMA money going to Donald Trump's golf course visits. Policy versus fundamentals, the positive market reactions and rate cut hopes may be more sentiment driven than grounded in solid trade and industrial data. If trade or import disruptions like tariffs and supply chain issues resurface, the upside might reverse. How about we get rid of the tariffs and stop using public monies for golf course visits? Trade signals are weekly covered in the last 24 hours. No major new trade report from any of the top outlets. External risk factors, the strong model estimate and public commentary assume sustained growth, but risks such as input cost inflation, the tariffs, driving inflation, weak global demand for U.S. exports or supply chain disruption could undermine it. It's vital to monitor exports, manufacturing, investment, and trade partner behavior. U.S. Census Bureau, September 25th retail sales and food services sales report. Because prior months' releases were delayed by the federal shutdown, this release will give a first glance at household spending in a delayed window. It may reveal whether consumer demand remains strong or is softening. What to watch: year-over-year change in retail and food services sales, control for inflation, category breakdown, durables versus non-durables, signal of consumer health, and GDP contribution. U.S. Census Bureau durable goods orders report for September. Reports are getting close to coming out now. The reports that have been delayed by the government shutdown. Durable goods orders are a proxy for business investment and manufacturing demand, a sector showing signs of weakness. With manufacturing PMI softening, this data will help confirm or challenge that trend. What to watch: core durable goods orders, ex-defense, ex-aircraft, for example, month-to-month change, backlog orders data, whether businesses' demand is actually weakening, and what that implies for capex and employment. Bureau of Economic Analysis, BEA, personal income and outlays for October 2025, December 5th, 2025 at 8:30 a.m. ET per BEA release schedule. That is the schedule for when we will receive this data. This data will provide insight into how much households are earning and spending. Key for consumer demand and inflation risk. Given delays in many data sets, this is one of the next major releases. Is that why we're using the shutdown to try and delay economic data? What to watch: real personal consumption, expenditures, PCE growth, personal income growth versus inflation, savings rate, and whether rate growth is holding up. If income is flat or declining, it raises downside risk to consumption and economic growth. I saw a chart laid out giving a list of the different goods and services that Americans buy. Groceries being on the top of the list with like a 50% increase. So when we get this data set, it's going to give us an idea of how hard the wallet of the individual American is actually being hit. How much more are we spending on basic necessities? So that's set to release on December 5th. That's a big watch item for anybody watching the economy right now. Data gap risk: because many data sets were delayed by the shutdown, most likely on purpose. These upcoming releases carry extra weight if they surprise to the downside. The administration's optimistic messaging, the load of horseshit of no recession risk, will be tested. Business investment versus manufacturing drag. Durable goods orders will give a clear signal of whether manufacturing weakness is structural. If orders drop sharply, policy intervention or industrial strategy should be scrutinized. Consumer health mismatch: retail sales versus personal income outlays will show whether spending is buoyed by real income growth or fading savings and credit. If spending stays up while incomes lag, the risk to households grows. That is the most important thing that we should all probably be keeping an eye on. Again, it is going to be coming out around December 5th. This is the Consumer Health Report. Trade policy and regulatory transparency, business investment and spending may reflect indirect effects of trade policy, tariffs, and supply chain disruption. For example, the administration should be held accountable for explaining how trade strategy supports or undermines these numbers. Data release, consensus forecast data, source implications if outcome differs. Retail sales September 2025 MOM a 0.4% increase, some models 0.3%. Trading Economics and Reuters mention next week release if much below forecast, e.g. flat or negative. That signals consumer demand is weaker than administration messaging suggests, undermining the no recession risk load of horseshit that Scott Bessent is trying to feed us. Weasel Bessent. If much above, it could mask a structural weakness by overstating spending. Durable goods orders September 2025 MOM 0.2% increase. X defense data 1.9% increase. FX Street as estimates consensus panels. If orders fall, e.g. negative, that signals manufacturing business investment is deteriorating, a major risk given earlier softer PMI data. If significantly stronger, it may justify optimism, but raises questions whether policy effects, trade and tariffs are influencing investment unexpectedly. Again, we're waiting for all of these reports to be released. They will be released soon. This one is going to let us know if the tariffs are fucking up the economy. I mean, it's just an indicator on there's probably a lot of ways that the tariffs are fucking up the economy. But this is gonna, if the goal of the tariffs is to have everything be American made, isolationism, which is very stupid, by the way. If the goal of that is to make it so that we're manufacturing in the United States and increasing exports, that's things that are leaving the country, instead of buying things from other countries, which is supposedly part of the argument behind why we're doing tariffs, this report will show us if our manufacturers, the people who are supposed to be making the goods that we're supposed to be exporting, right? If the goal of the tariffs is to make it so that we're sending stuff out of the country instead of purchasing things from other countries, if our manufacturers are struggling, which I am assuming is likely what we're going to see in this upcoming report, that directly shows that the tariffs are having a negative impact and that they're not helping. Okay? Because it means that we're not making stuff to export stuff, which is the whole point of the tariffs, supposedly. You can't just flip a switch and expect the entire economy to suddenly change and shift overnight. And that's exactly what this is. Okay, if you want America to become an export-driven, selling things to other countries, nation, you need to upgrade the infrastructure. You need to make sure that the businesses have access to the things that they need to be able to manufacture. Not just slam down tariffs on half of the planet, take all the money, and snicker off to your golf course while stealing money from FEMA. I get really frustrated when I'm reporting, especially on the economy, apparently. Because many monthly data releases were delayed by the shutdown, the surprise factor is higher than usual. Large misses or big beats will be especially meaningful. If retail sales show weak growth and consumer sentiment remains low, there is a risk the administration's public statements about consumer resilience are at odds with reality. You don't say. For durable goods orders, given earlier manufacturing weaknesses and high inventory levels, a weak reading would strengthen the case that manufacturing drag is structural. Then questions about trade and tariff policy and investment incentives become more urgent. If data come in much stronger than consensus, it's worth probing. Are the gains concentrated in a few sectors like defense, aircraft, or broadly distributed, meaning the whole economy? Is everybody getting a piece of the pie, or is it just, weapons manufacturers? Are they temporary, e.g. inventory rebuilds, rather than sustainable? To maintain transparency, ask for the underlying sectors and whether policy or trade interventions played a role. Here are historical surprise ranges for the past 5 years for the two key economic releases, retail sales, MOM, and durable goods orders, along with what would count as material deviation. Data shows monthly growth typically averages at an increase of 0.39% since 1992. Recent actual, August 2025, an increase of 0.6% versus forecast of an increase of 0.2%, modest upside surprise. Material deviation rule of thumb, upside surprise, 0.6% increase or more, well above average, suggests stronger consumer spending. I'm not seeing... What are we measuring as consumer spending? Okay, because I'm running a business and what I'm seeing is that people don't want to spend money right now. Okay, people are pinching their wallets. Where are we getting these numbers? I'm a little bit confused. Downside surprise of 0% or negative would be material indicating stress in household demand. Durable goods orders, MOM, recent data, August 2025 orders rose 2.9% versus forecast 0.3%. Ex-defense orders rose 1.9% in the same month. Trading economics. Material deviation rule of thumb, a positive surprise of an increase of 1% or more depending on forecast is strong. A negative surprise of 1%, down 1% or worse would signal a meaningful manufacturing investment slowdown. Summary for retail sales, if the actual comes in below 0% or an increase of 0.2%, that would be a red flag. Above 0.6% signals upside momentum. For durable goods, if the actual is below negative 1%, that's concerning. An increase of 1% plus 1% or more above forecast is strong. Because the shutdown has delayed data releases, surprises may be larger than usual. So treat any deviation of plus 0.8% to 1% as material. And remember, kids, the stock market is not the economy. Just because the S&P 500 or Dow Jones might be performing does not mean that wages are growing, jobs are secure, inflation is under control, or that people are thriving. This ends today's economic report. We will see you guys later. Bye.
So the Olympics is great. And Johnny, for the others, the World Cup, Johnny is the head of it. We had our top people, Wasserman. They all came in on the Olympics, and then I saw Johnny. And we got the World Cup, too. And, it's only because they rigged the election that I'll be your president representing you there. I got both of them. I got the Olympics, and I got the World Cup. And I said, it's too bad. One was in 2026, and the other was in 2028. And I said, I won't be there. I won't be your president. But then they rigged the election, and now we won. So I'm going to be your president for the Olympics and for the World Cup. So, Johnny, thank you for the World Cup. And everybody, thank you for the Olympics. We're going to have a great time.
Hey, guys, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment to my videos. And also, don't forget to check out my shop where you could get this awesome Real Patriots Punch Nazis t-shirt. America, fuck yeah. And if you go to the link tree in my bio on most platforms, it's got links to everything, all of my stuff. You can find my shop there. I'm on eBay. You can also get this cool Exterminate MAGA sticker, because MAGA's fucking cockroaches. And fuck MAGA. Abolish MAGA. Fuck you, MAGA.